So welcome to the session on building a circular culture. Bill Shireman asked me to be the moderator for this panel. And my name is Will Grant, and we'll do introductions, and then we'll jump into the panel. So my name is Will Grant. I work at the Pachamama Alliance. We are an international organization that works on changing the human relationship, the human-earth relationship, so that we create a world that is environmentally thriving, socially just, and spiritually interconnected. And we work both at the grassroots level, all the way up to the level of consciousness and policy.
Hi everybody, my name is Diamond Spratling. I am the proud founder and executive director of Girl Plus Environment. We are a national member-based organization, environmental justice organization that works to get Black and brown women into the circular economy and into the climate movement.
Daigwe Johar, hello, I'm Manisha. I am the executive director of ProgramEarth, where we connect indigenous communities, governments, and organizations to remediate soil and water across 2.6 million acres within the United States, or Turtle Island, Brazil, and India through both science, traditional ecological knowledge, and ceremony.
So our idea with this panel was to look at the questions of building a circular culture. And by way of that, could you put the slide up? Some of you may have heard of the work of Donella Meadows, who is one of the original thinkers in systems thinking and how to create systemic change. And this is a model that she brought up of the key ways to intervene in systems to actually create systemic change. And what you'll notice is at the bottom of the leverage point are the elements like policies and practices and resource flows. These are easier to do, but they are ways that can work to change it. So as we work towards a circular economy, that is a lot of what the conversation has been about today. The next level up is looking at relationships and connections and power dynamics. It's changing laws and policies. But one of the things about intervening in systems is that changing the mental models, changing the culture, changing the paradigm is some of the most effective ways, because when people come from a different mindset, then the need for the changes make more sense. So an example being, and this is what a big theme of our panel will be, if people don't feel a connection to nature, if people are growing and living in a culture that is linear, take, make, throw away, if that is what is given as normal and good and useful, then convincing them that they need to invest in a circular economy or change their behavior is really difficult. But when people see that we have an inclusive, that they want an inclusive culture, when they have a connection to nature that is the paradigm that guides their life, then the idea that we need a circular economy becomes a mechanism for them to reach their goals and to live in the values that they want to live in. So a lot of our conversation today is going to be on elements of that, and especially looking at the connection with indigenous cultures, because indigenous cultures for millennia functioned in circularity. They created deep systems of relationship with Earth, sophisticated systems and materials economies, where they were shaping the world around them for the abundance of all beings, and then humans were benefiting as part of that nature. And so, as we talked about doing this panel, one of the things we talked about was rather than just, culture, you can talk about culture, we can also live culture and experience it. So we're going to start with two things that might be a little bit different than you would have expected in a conversation about this as an experience of culture. And I want to invite you to just take a moment and kind of put aside the policy mindset and be in this experience with us. And so we'll start with Manisha.
Thank you so much, Will. Before we share this song, I'd love for you all to think of the ancestors that you want to invite into this room with us. Perhaps even envision your future descendants as we sing this song for the water. Wanaki yokahu, wanaki yokahu, Itivaka huava vivima wenai. Itivaka huava vivima wenai. Waneki yokahu. Waneki Hahom. Thank you.
I'd like to invite you, if you would, to also maybe take a moment to close your eyes, because I want to bring us into a sense of our connection with nature. Or if not, just to soften your gaze. I'm just going to name some things that are realities that we all probably know, but I don't know how often each one of us gets to slow down and really experience them. So, the water in your body, 70% of your body, was very recently a cloud. It was a stream. It was the ocean. With each inhale, you're taking in the breath of trillions of phytoplankton in the ocean that created the oxygen that we breathe. The grasslands that are around us here are the grasslands that are giving us breath. Our human body has more cells that are not human than we have human cells. Our gut biome is altered daily by the environment that we're in, by the table that we touch, by the doorknob that we handle, by what we breathe in, by the tree we walked by. It shifts us. And science is now showing that our gut biome influences our immune system, our health, our emotions, our mental states. There is no separation between us and nature. It's not only a metaphysical or a poetic concept, it's a reality that we live in. Everything about us is interconnected with the world around us. Part of our culture is the idea that we can throw something away. Trash, electronic waste. But my question is, when we throw something away, where is away? There's a reason that we have plastics in our blood and PFAS in raindrops. This false idea that we are separate from nature has allowed us to create a system where people in this culture tells us we're throwing something away, the problem goes away. But there is no away. We are nature. And also, when we create for nature, when we restore an ecosystem, when we clean a river, when we prevent trash from going into the waste stream, but instead cycling back into the work we use, that is a gift that we give to nature. That is a gift that we give to ourselves. The disconnection from nature is also a disconnection from consequences. It's a broken feedback loop. And our experience in Pachamama Alliance is that once people feel their connection with nature, when they slow down and become that connection with nature, that begins to change the very way that they live and their sense of what it means to be alive. But our other experience is that once people feel that, they step into the systems that we live in. When they're trying to figure out what to do with what bin they should put this thing into. And the deep disconnection between that sense of interconnection and the reality that they're living in becomes something which means that they don't feel like they can live in that sense of connection. That there's there's this very real separation in the way that we live. So circularity matters. The circular economy that we've been talking about is humans' ability to recreate the world, because we're never separate from nature, but we can get caught up in a myth that we are. And when we can provide people with the material, actual ways to build an economy, to build a culture, to build a way of living in which humans are taking care of nature, then we are taking care of ourselves. And that, to me, is what we mean by being in a circular culture. Manisha, could you talk about some examples that you see this in relationship to working with indigenous peoples and the way in which they live in this connection with nature and a sense of how that is a guide for what we could be building?
So I like to ground us in something called the 7-generation framework. Because I think often we think technology only came after the Industrial Revolution. But technology has always been kind of a way of like human expression and creation, whether those are like the bridges that were built by the Khosla tribe in India, which was made through tree roots and has sustained over thousands of years, or the agricultural innovations in Machu Picchu, or even the ways of managing land here on Turtle Island. And when we think of ourselves as nature, taking care of nature, or being in nature, we often think longer term than just our own life on this planet. The 7-generation framework pretty much references how we should lead with the 7 generations before us and the wisdom that they experienced, and we design things in a way that it lasts the next 7 generations. I think when we're in these Western systems, right, a lot of times the decisions that we're making, we might make it based on our tenure in a position. For example, if you're a council member, maybe you're only thinking 2 years out. Maybe if you're a CEO, you're only thinking 4 or 5 years out. And so really embodying this 7 generations mindset is putting yourself back into nature, but also putting yourself back into the collective. And some of the ways that, we're bringing back a lot of this knowledge to inform the next generations is, in a lot of ways, biodiversity. There's a reason that more than 80% of the biodiversity in this world is stewarded by indigenous communities, and it's because even if we are in a surplus of data, what that knowledge or that remembrance is the relationality. So that means, for example, with the Klamath River, Hoopa communities remembered that the salmon, for example, which is already classified as a keystone species, but they remember that they spawn in wetlands while certain policies were looking to dredge those wetlands because they thought maybe that's one way to address methane. And it was just like, no, we might be reducing this naturally occurring methane, but what it does is if the salmon cannot spawn there, and you already have salmon that spawn there, adult salmon will go to the ocean, get marine-derived nutrients, and then come back exactly to where they spawned. And in that journey, they are bringing back seeds. Their decaying body at end of life ends up replenishing the Douglas fir and other anti-inflammable native plants there. And so while we think that we are offsetting the methane, what we're actually doing is contributing to wildfire risk and potentially flood risk. So it's that sort of ancestral memory that pretty much expands us to think less in a linear manner and more in a cyclical manner. What are the different cycles of life? How are they going to impact the other cycles of events like wildfire risk or flood risk. And I mean, I could go on about even how, that ancestral memory, for example, in the Four Corners, it's reminding us of like the corner potato, which is something that grows in droughts. It grows into that particular ecoregion without us having to change, how much water we're bringing in to like grow something like alfalfa. It's like, how do we use what's already there, what's already in relation? And that tends to make life a little bit easier for everyone involved.
Thank you. Diamond, one of the elements about building a circular culture is also a culture that is inclusive, that all the elements of our culture are involved in creating this. And you've done so much work in terms of integrating and bringing folks into that. Could you talk about the importance of diversity and inclusion and the element of bringing these voices that are often too marginalized into our dialogues around the environment and the work that we do?
Absolutely. This is my favorite thing to talk about. So I got into this space, honestly, from a Save the Polar Bears commercial that I saw many, many years ago. I was a kid, and I was like, I want to save the polar bears too. But what I learned very early on is that the other kids who looked like me in school, they weren't interested in that also, but that was because they weren't introduced to it. There was a space that they didn't feel included. They didn't feel like there was room for them in this circular economy or in this work. And so I remember very vividly, I went onto Facebook and I was telling my family and friends, I said, we gotta save the polar bears. We have to protect the planet and do all these things. And they're like, okay, but like I have to put food on the table and I have to pay for my prescriptions and for food and all those things. And so the way that they saw themselves in the space was little to none. And so when it comes to creating solutions, creating equitable solutions that actually address the root causes of climate change and other environmental things that we see, we have to not only include, but we have to advocate and prioritize the experiences that many marginalized communities experience every single day. And that goes down to even spaces like these, and the people who are in these rooms, and the people who are not, and the people who don't feel safe in these spaces. And so when it comes to how do we create spaces for us to feel included, a lot of that comes down to culture, which is why we're all standing on this stage or sitting on this stage talking about culture, because we see and we know that in order for people to feel included, in order for people to be able to know that they are a part of this circular economy and that they're a part of shifting this narrative, they have to be a part of the process from the very beginning stages to the middle, that whole community engagement framework and chain that I'm sure all of us are familiar with. But I think a lot of that gets down to providing those opportunities and making sure that people feel seen in that work. And a lot of the work that we do at Girl Plus Environment, and the whole reason why I started the organization 7 years ago, was because I didn't see myself reflected in it, and my friends and family didn't see themselves reflected in this work either, especially when it came to the solutions. Of course, we were always talked about when it came to the problems, but the solutions, we weren't included. And so I created an entire organization that's centered around Black culture and climate and community. And those are words that we don't always hear in the same word, in the same sentence, right? Black culture and climate. But I felt that it was so, so important for people who look like me to see themselves in the solutions and be a part of creating that solutions. And so it has grown to be now a 750 member organization across 35 different states of young Black and brown girls going around saying and knowing that they can be a part of the solutions and actually implementing them right there in their own communities. So inclusion is critical in this movement for a circular economy.
So I want to follow up on something that you said. Can you give an example? Like you said, hearing the environment and Black culture is something that isn't in the mainstream dialogue. Can you give examples of where those things come together?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a very recent example, actually. So we do a training program. I know you and I talked about that briefly as well. And so our entire advocacy training program is for young Black and brown women to learn how can I advocate for climate and environmental issues in my own community, but more importantly, how can I get people in my community to also see themselves as advocates too? And so it's kind of this train the trainer program. And at the end of the program, and this was the first year we took it to Alabama, which is really exciting. We brought it to the Gulf South, and we hosted a Girlies Green Fest 2 weeks ago, which was so fun. It was all at the intersection of culture and climate, and people were coming up to us constantly saying, I've never been to an environmental event. I don't even know what this stuff was before I came here, but I'm here and I'm writing letters to my representative and I'm having a grand old time, because at the same time we're listening to music in the Black culture. We have food that represents us. We are around people who look like us, and we're just having a great time. And we are also making a difference in our communities. We are submitting public comment. We're learning about the processes and that there are careers in this space as well. And so our Girlies Green Fest was a really, really fun experience, but we do things like that all the time because it's so important to intersect the both.
Beautiful, thank you. Manisha, what are some examples of ways to embed circular values into our civic institutions and community relationships?
I think a lot of it is that shared experience. And I love this example of the Girlies Green Fest because I think in some way we often see a lot of the major changes when we take different communities down the river with us. Where we're, putting the salmon on cedar spikes and being like, this is how life could have been so simple. I think on a grander scale too, on a more systems scale, right? We started this conversation about how can we make decisions when we might not have a relationship to the thing that we're making a decision on. And a lot of where our work at ProgramEarth intersects often ends up being the watershed management plans within states and municipalities. And a lot of that is due to that knowledge exchange that needs to happen, that relationality of, hey, whether it's the salmon in, the Klamath or the caddisflies in San Juan County, and knowing that, we can't solve for the Colorado River if we don't, address that the San Juan Basin actually pours 50% of the sediment into the Colorado River. These kind of, I guess, blind spots we can have when we don't have a relationship with that land or that water for millennia. So I think on that sort of systems level, facilitating that knowledge exchange in a way that ultimately empowers communities to still stay sovereign in that management. And there are some really beautiful examples, like, in San Juan County, almost all of the bioremediation that's going on right now is through the conservation corps that are part of the Intertribal Coalition. And that's including the Ute Mountain Ute, the Southern Ute, different chapters of the Navajo Nation. There's a lot of ways for us to have this sort of exchange that creates circularity and also empowers the sovereignty of the communities that we work with. It's even brought back the native crops like peach and corn. And, to Diamond's point, having that level of culture embedded from our food to our practices, that all reaffirms that change is happening, We do have enough time. If the change is happening in our community, we're empowered to keep taking it beyond our community.
I want to speak to a minute about the larger vision of where we are and also the specific politics of bringing these things into action, which is that one of the things that I found in working with so many elements in the environment in the United States is that I think people in the environmental movement often have a feeling that humans are bad. Humans are the problem, right? That we are locusts, that we are a virus, that we are cancer, whatever else. And Pachamama Alliance works closely with indigenous nations, and one of the things that they taught us was that, in their view, humans have a vital role to play in the flourishing of life. That the fact that we can shape ecosystems is one of the fundamental roles that humans have that has actually been forgotten. and I think that this is a critical piece in the environmental movement, in the circular movement, in all of them, is that if people feel that they are only a source of the problem, then the idea that they can be the source of the solution is harder for them to reach, or that their activities don't matter. And so I think having this idea that they can actually be proactive agents to be a gift to nature, I have found it such a fundamental shift in the way that people think about their role. But then the next piece that I find is that even if people feel that, they are unclear about how to get involved in politics or how to make changes. And more importantly, their sense is that politics is always about right and wrong and good guys and bad guys. And one of the reasons Bill asked me to be on this panel is that we do an international training system where we teach people how to engage in their community from a place of being rooted in nature, but then also teaching community organizing and political organizing skills. And one of the things that we found is that in the same way that there's this kind of take, make, throw away part of our culture, there is a take, make, throw away part of our politics. And when folks have that, when they have the sense that the only thing that politics can be is oppositional and conflict, rather than encompassing everyone, that everyone matters in the system, a lot of people don't want to get into the politics. If we look at our political culture right now, our media culture, the politics of personal destruction, the politics of who can prove that the other person is wrong. And so I think a vital part of creating circularity is also an element of working with people to find the ways to engage in politics where they are finding solutions rather than focusing on problems. The idea of proactivism is focusing our politics on what we are working for rather than what we're fighting against. And I want to say that John Warner's talk this morning about green chemistry and how he worked with industries was, to me, a masterclass in the politics of a circular politics. A sense of working with industry and activists and bringing them all together, bringing Republicans and Democrats together to think about what is the world we want to proactively create rather than what is wrong and who's to blame. And that's not just a kumbaya statement. There are strategies, there are practices, there are ways to work in this that fundamentally shift them. And our next speaker, who's going to be talking about the Braver Angels, is a really concrete example of that. And the thing that I would like to say, and in a few minutes, we're going to go, actually in about a minute, we're going to go into just question and answer and dialogue with all of you in the room, is that the reason we put this up here is that what I saw in this room is that we have so many of the solutions that we need. They're pretty extraordinary. But the process of the relationships and connections, the process of the power dynamics, the process of our mental models and changing those are the things that if we don't shift those, then all of the brilliance of people working in green chemistry, the brilliance of people working in feedstocks for recycling systems will always be in an uphill battle of working for a more convenient system if what the value of people hold is their own individual convenience, rather than thinking about 7 generations in the future, rather than thinking about how to include the community in that. And so that's why we wanted to offer this, and to bring it closed in that is to say that this is not that anything is wrong, but that an encouragement for folks to think about the process of changing the mindsets, the paradigms, and fundamentally changing people's connection to each other and changing people's connection to nature. Okay. And so with that, we want to open it up to dialogue, to questions and answers from the floor. Do you want to take one of the mics?
Hello, my name is Marin. First of all, thank you all for speaking. It was very inspirational. Y'all have mentioned the 7-generation framework and thinking of humans as not only the problem, but also the solution. I guess, do y'all have any other suggestions on how to change people's mindsets around nature, especially if you're dealing with a very, I guess, disconnected society?
A lot of it, I think, I don't know, I think our imagination is our biggest change agent, and I think a lot of people think our imagination lives cerebrally. And what I've noticed is a lot of people's othering of nature is actually more about them feeling disembodied. And we're in a system that always inundates us with cortisol, right? You open up your social media app, you like talk to a friend, and they have like a billion problems going on and so forth. But I think our ability to imagine change is also tied to the amount of healing and embodiment that we also get to engage in. So as simple as it seems, sometimes taking people outside, like there's so many studies showing that putting our hands into the soil because of the microbiome in soil has a very, it has an impact on our serotonin levels. Hugging a tree, even singing that water song, it's actually been shown that singing stimulates our vagus nerve. So really, a lot of times people's kind of resistance to want to imagine change has more to do with how much embodiment they have access to. And if we can help them with that embodiment, we do so many things just like nature. We sing like the birds, we flow like the river, and all of that helps. And sometimes it's not talking at them, it's experiencing things with them.
And I'll say as well, just from another angle, I've always said this, I think this sector has a communication problem. I think that we don't know how to communicate in a way so that everyone knows that we need everyone all in. And that's why a lot of us feel like we can't enter the space. Just as you said, we have a lot of just judgments in this work and in this space. Like, oh, you're not vegan, you're not vegetarian, you aren't all of these things. And so I know for me, very early on when I got into the space, it was very critical that I was talking about the work from a very intersectional space. And so making sure that people know that this is as much of a health issue and an economic issue, and even my ability to go to work every single day, so that people know this isn't just about nature just because we care about nature, it's because you are a part of nature, and this is your ability to do all the incredible things that you love to do every day, whether it is your ability to go grab coffee, because where do you think you're getting the coffee beans from? So I think a lot of that goes down to the communications and the intersectionality within all of it as well.
Giving people a vision of what we could be moving towards, I find, is a really powerful way to do this. Because one of the things is that if we connect people with nature and then talk about all the ways it's being destroyed, we've actually often just re-traumatized them. Yeah? So bringing people into connection and then talking about where we're going, giving people a vivid image of what the world we are building would look like. One of the things that I would offer for this group is to think about what would a fully circular world look like? And it can even just be something where you have people just do an active imagination of walking through what their daily life would look like if we were in a fully circular economy. So connecting folks with their sense of nature and something that they love, and then saying, this is the world that we have that we could already build. Right? If we did what we already know how to do, I mean, again, John Warner had this incredible element. Remember when he showed that, for those who were here, the picture of the mall, and he said, even if everybody wanted completely safe, non-toxic material goods, we could only provide about 10% of what they wanted. But now imagine if it was 100%. Like, what if we just said, imagine walking into the store where you knew that every product that you were going to buy was clearly labeled and you could make a choice. Most of them were made without any toxicity put into the environment. And the ones that don't have that are clearly labeled, and there's a clear way to dispose of it so it never goes into the environment. How would it feel to shop if that was your option? So leading people into the solution, because what they've found is that if people can have a vision of where we're moving towards, and they see that it's more beautiful and interesting and fun and sexy and cheaper, then people will get involved with it. And so connecting folks with nature and then giving them a vision of what we're moving towards, I think, is one of the ways that we can bring people into that. Thanks. Other questions?
Appreciate it. First of all, thank you very much to all three of you, doing a great job of just encouragement and inspiration towards this the relationships, the connections, and into this very important industry and sector. One of the questions I have for Diamond is congratulations on your growth to the 750-member community that you've created, right, for the Black and brown young women coming into this, motivated to come into this area of opportunity, both to help out nature and the actual business and solution side of it as well. I'm just curious, of course, you mentioned about social activism, political activity, getting movement within the community. Are you seeing a migration of some of the young women towards STEM, the science and technology behind it? Because I saw a presentation yesterday about a lot of opportunities throughout California where UC Agricultural and Recovery is bringing a lot of resource opportunities in the state of California. I don't know about the rest of the country. Hopefully it's going on there as well. Are you seeing women moving towards that direction?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for all of your kind words. It has not been easy running a nonprofit the past 7 years as an ED, but we're still here. So yes, we have absolutely seen also growth within our own member base of Black and brown women entering the STEM fields and just like in green jobs as well, which has been incredible. And we're an advocacy organization, but one of the things that many of our members have expressed of that, yes, I love that I can spend my weekends doing this and after work and just like being a movement builder. And I also want to do this for my career now too. And so that's been a space that we've now been able to enter in or connect our members with. Many of our members have been able to get jobs in the field now, which has been absolutely incredible. It wasn't something that was intentional, but something that we've seen happen. And so we've seen that when people are feeling more passionate and able to be a part of things, even from an advocacy standpoint, that they now want to get their careers into this space as well. And so it's been an incredible just like journey to be able to see that and continue doing it. We have a mentorship program and we have an entire online resource hub where our members can find access to climate jobs, funding, resources, really whatever they need to not only be involved in the movement, but also for their career, because it's been a growing demand. So the demand is there. We've just got to continue to make sure that we have the resources and funding to support it. So thank you for asking.
Okay, so I'm going to draw us to a close because both Diamond and Manisha have to go to their next talk and book signings. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attention. It's been a great conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you.